Okay, so picture this. You've got medical scans, right? MRI, CT, amazing stuff, giving us these incredible windows inside the body. We see organs, bones, the works.
It's fundamental, yeah.
But what about the outside? Our biggest organ, the skin. Turns out mapping that in 3D scans is, well, less talked about, but really crucial for some super advanced medical stuff.
Absolutely essential.
So today we're doing a deep dive. We're peeling back the layers, really getting into 3D skin segmentation and medical imaging. And we've got this great paper to guide us. It's called 3D Skin Segmentation Methods in Medical Imaging, a comparison by Martina Piccini and Giuseppe Patine.
Yeah, it's a good one. And our mission today really is to figure out why separating out that skin surface is so important, not just, for cool pictures, but for actual practical uses.
Right.
And then we'll get into what this paper really compares to very different ways of doing it. One's more like classic computer graphics, geometry-based.
The algorithmic way.
Exactly. And the other is, well, AI, deep learning. We'll see how they stack up against each other, especially when you use different scans, like MRI versus CT.
So why should you listening care about, drawing a line around skin in a scan?
Yeah.
Because this isn't just some lab experiment. This tech could genuinely change how doctors diagnose things, how surgeons plan operations, maybe even how we monitor our own health stuff remotely. It allows for these incredibly detailed digital patient models.
It's got huge potential.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
So basically, skin segmentation here.
Yeah.
It just means finding and isolating the skin in those 3D images.
Yeah.
Separating it from the air outside and all the anatomy inside.
Just tracing the outline, essentially.
In 3D, yeah.
Yeah.
But its fundamental role, the paper points out, is actually pretty technical, but really important. It's key for registering data.
Registering, like lining things up.
Exactly. Lining up different scans of the same person, maybe taken at different times with different machines, or even lining up the scan with a real patient during surgery. That 3D skin surface, it's like a reliable anchor point, a frame of reference.
Ah, okay. And that anchor point unlocks the cool applications, right? This is where it gets interesting.
Definitely.
So once you have that precise 3D skin model,
Yeah.
you mentioned personalized medicine, doctors could simulate treatments.
Yeah, imagine testing out radiation paths or planning surgery directly on a digital copy of that specific patient's body surface.
Wow. And for surgery planning itself.
Invaluable. Surgeons can do a practice run on the 3D model from the scan. They can see exactly how things looked before treatment and compare it after. It just gives them a much clearer map of the outside relative to the inside. Better accuracy.
And remote monitoring, you mentioned digital twins.
Yeah. Think about creating this super accurate digital copy of your skin surface from a scan. Then maybe you use a sensor or take photos and update that twin over time. Track how a mole is changing or how a wound is healing.
So your doctor could watch it remotely, but with this underlying 3D context.
Precisely. With a level of detail we just haven't had before for remote tracking.
Okay. Now, the paper mentions MRI isn't always the go-to for skin, right? Compared to CT.
That's true. Often, MRI is really tuned to see internal soft tissues well, and sometimes the resolution right at the surface isn't as high.
So why use it for skin then?
Well, it becomes super important when you need detail on the skin and the stuff right underneath it. Think deeper layers, muscle, connective tissue, for things like cancer involving the skin, or planning reconstructive surgery, or even tissue engineering. MRI gives you that detailed view below the surface that other methods might miss.
Gotcha. So it has its specific important uses even if it's trickier. Okay, so we need to find the skin surface. The paper looks at two main camps, algorithmic methods.
For traditional rule-based image processing stuff.
And the AI-driven methods, deep learning.
Right. And people have tried lots of things over the years. Simple brightness thresholds, region growing, edge detection, you name it. But this paper zeroes in on two specific examples to really compare them properly.
Okay, let's start with the algorithmic one they picked, a graphics-based segmentation method. Sounds like it comes from, well, computer graphics.
It does, yeah. Developed by some of the same authors, actually.
Okay.
The basic idea is pretty smart. It assumes there's empty space, like background, in the corners of the scanned image.
Okay.
It starts there in the known background, kind of probes inwards. It calculates what it calls a skin isovalue, basically, the brightness level that seems to mark the edge between background and body.
Like finding the cliff edge.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
Then it goes through pixel by pixel, slice by slice.
Yeah.
If a pixel is darker than that value, it's background, 0. If it's brighter, it's marked as part of the body edge, 1. It traces out that boundary. The real plus is it's designed to be flexible. You can adapt it to different image times by tweaking settings.
So trace inwards based on brightness. adaptable.
Got it. Now, the AI contender, TotalSegmentator, that name implies a lot.
It does a lot. It's a big, deep learning model, trained on a massive data set of CT scans mostly. It's designed to find and label, I think, 104 different anatomical structures automatically.
Oh.
Yeah. And the reason the paper chose it is because it can specifically segment the body edge or external surface. And crucially, it's pre-trained. You can just download it and run it. No need for new training for this specific task. It represents that automated, powerful AI approach.
Okay, so we have the flexible, rule-based graphics method versus the automated, data-hungry AI.
Yeah.
How do they actually compare? Because the paper makes it clear it's not about which one is just better, right?
Yeah.
It's about trade-offs.
Exactly. It depends on your data, your application, even your computer.
So what are the key comparison points?
Okay, first, multimodality support. This is a big one. The graphics-based method. Pretty flexible. You can adjust its parameters and run it on MRI or CT.
Right. TotalSegmentator. It was mainly trained on CT. So the paper found it really struggles with MRI unless you specifically retrain or fine-tune it for MRI data, which is hard because MRI scans vary so much.
So the AI is powerful, but maybe a bit specialized based on its training?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Performance is often tied directly to that training data. Then there's automation versus control. TotalSegmentator is basically push button, feed it the scan, get the segments.
Fully automatic?
The graphics method is mostly automatic too, but it's transparent. You can see the steps, you can tweak the parameters, you can refine the result if needed. More user control, more understanding of why it did what it did.
That matters in medicine, I bet. Interpretability.
Hugely, which leads to the next point. But first, computational cost. The graphics method is pretty light, runs on a standard computer, cost scales nicely with image size.
Easy to run.
TotalSegmentator needs more horsepower. Ideally, a good GPU, a graphics card, to run fast. It can run on a regular CPU, but it's slow. They do offer a faster low-res option, though.
So AI needs the big machines. What about accuracy and robustness?
TotalSegmentator is very accurate on data, like its training data, so CT scans. But, like we said, performance drops on MRI. The graphics method can be very accurate if you tune it right, but it can be sensitive to image noise or if the parameters aren't quite perfect. Some simpler algorithmic methods can also leak, like the segmentation might spread where it shouldn't.
Okay. And you mentioned interpretability earlier.
Yeah, the algorithmic ways are generally white boxes. You can follow the logic. Deep learning models like TotalSegmentator are often black boxes. They give you an answer, but figuring out exactly how they reached it is tough. That can be a barrier to trust in hospitals.
Understandable. Anything else practical?
One really neat detail, handling the patient bed. You know how patients are lying on a table in the scanner?
Yeah, it shows up in the image.
TotalSegmentator is actually trained to recognize the bed in CT scans and automatically remove it from the segmentation.
Oh, that's clever.
The graphics-based method, just looking for that outer body edge, includes the bed outline. You need an extra step to remove it manually. Also, the graphics method adds padding to avoid gaps at the image edges, while the paper notes TotalSegmentator surface could sometimes have little holes.
Fascinating practical differences. Okay, that's the theory. How did they actually perform on real scans? They used this Hausdorff distance metric, right? Lower distance means the surfaces are closer, more similar.
Exactly. Lower is better. So they tested on different body parts and scans. For abdomen MRI, the graphics-based method won. Its surface was closer to the reference. The paper directly links this to TotalSegmentator being trained on CT, not MRI. It just couldn't follow the body edges as well in the MRI.
So the flexibility paid off there. What about total body CT? That's TotalSegmentator's home turf.
Right. And here, both methods did a good job finding the skin contour cleanly. The main difference was practical. TotalSegmentator automatically got rid of the bed. The graphics method didn't.
Okay. How about the head? Head MRI.
Graphics-based method, again, had the lower Hausdorff distance, suggesting a better segmentation of the actual skin. Interestingly, the paper notes TotalSegmentator's result seemed to cling more to the skull boundary rather than the outer skin itself in that case.
And head CT.
Here, surprisingly, TotalSegmentator had a high distance, meaning worse performance in this specific test case. The reason was it didn't find the borders on every single slice in the scan, and it kind of stopped segmenting at the neck, not going down to the chest level shown in the scan.
So inconsistent even on CT sometimes.
In that particular test, yes. They also tested subsampled images lower resolution. The graphics method's accuracy scaled with the resolution, basically. TotalSegmentator does its own internal downsampling anyway. Comparing the lower-res surfaces, they're mostly similar, but the AI had bigger differences out near the arms and legs, the extremities.
Okay, interesting edge cases. But they also used a bigger data set, right? The Bauer data set, 52 people, CT and MR scans.
Yes, a more real-world test bed. They compared segmentations for the same person across different scan types.
And the winner was?
On this larger, more diverse set, the graphics-based method came out ahead overall. Lower average distances across the whole data set.
Why?
The conclusion was its general applicability. It could handle the variations between CT and MRI in different patient scans more consistently than the AI model, which was really optimized for one type of data.
Wow. So the takeaway is the traditional method was actually more robust across different types of real-world data.
It seems so, based on this study. It's a really important finding. AI is powerful, but its performance is deeply linked to the data it learned from. Adaptability still matters.
Absolutely fascinating. So bringing it back to the applications, what does this mean for how these 3D skin models get used?
Well, the paper reinforces their use as clinical tools, planning interventions, but also as these intuitive guides, maybe helping patients understand monitoring devices or their own anatomy better.
They had that specific example, right, with the spine.
Yeah, exactly. Taking a CT scan, segmenting the skin, but then using the internal scan data to pinpoint where, say, specific vertebrae, the spinous processes are located relative to that skin surface.
So you see the spine landmarks on the skin model.
Precisely. You get these subject-specific reference points on the outside that relate directly to the inside. Super useful for surgery planning, checking posture, monitoring changes. You could even visually map those points onto the 3D skin model.
Making the invisible visible, connecting inside and out for the patient, that's cool.
It really is.
And thinking about that AI black box problem, maybe visualizing the AI's results, its segmentations, its predicted landmarks onto these clear 3D skin models could actually help doctors understand and trust the AI more.
That's a great point. Using the visualization to improve interpretability, the paper definitely hints at that direction.
What about future work? Where does this research go next?
They mentioned a few key areas. One is using this 3D skin segmentation to create uncertainty maps for surgical planning.
Uncertainty maps?
Yeah, imagine overlaying colors on the 3D skin model, showing areas where the surgical navigation system might be less certain, maybe because the image quality there is poor, or it's near a really critical organ. Adds a layer of safety guidance.
Right.
They also explicitly talk about focusing on explainable and trustworthy AI directly tackling that black box issue for skin segmentation.
Making AI understandable.
And exploring things like unsupervised domain adaptation, fancy term. But it basically means finding ways to make AI models work well across different scanners, different hospitals, different patient types, without needing tons of new labeled data for every single variation. Making AI more flexible, essentially.
So making AI more like the adaptable graphics-based method in that respect.
Kind of bridging that gap, yeah.
Wow. Okay, that was quite the journey into, well, just the skin. But it's clear that accurately mapping this outer boundary in 3D medical images is way more complex and important than it might first sound. Essential for personalized medicine, surgery planning.
Absolutely. And we saw these two really different approaches clash, didn't we? The adaptable geometric method versus the automated but maybe more brittle AI model. Each has its place. Definitely depends on the imaging data you have and what you need that final skin model for.
And it was really striking how that traditional graphics method could actually outperform the cutting-edge AI in key tests, especially with tricky MRI data. It really highlights that AI isn't a silver bullet, and adaptability across different data types is still hugely important.
It really does, which, raises a pretty big question for the future.
Given this huge push we see everywhere to get AI into hospitals and clinics, but knowing that in medicine, accuracy, reliability, and understanding why a tool is giving you an answer are absolutely critical, non-negotiable things, how do we balance that? How do researchers and doctors harness the undeniable power of AI automation while making sure these tools are trustworthy, adaptable, and explainable enough to be truly safe and effective when faced with the sheer variety of real-world patients and medical scans?